Welcome back to the last hour of Kivumbi 2022. My name is Ken Mijungu. My colleague Akisa Wandera is on the other side. But before the discussion begins, let's go back to the board and show you a few of the notable names across the country who for a long time have been seen to influence the politics and the outcome of elections in those areas. We begin tonight with Western Kenya, and the first in line is the man we know as Kangumu, Fred Gumo. Now, he spent close to 4 decades in politics. He was a Kanu politician, if you remember that, entered in politics back in 1974 as a mayor of Kitale municipality, and he retired as a member of parliament for Westland. Now, Fred Gumo is still very active in politics, and he's been seen to endorse Raila Odinga, ODM leader Raila Odinga. And the next person on the line is Francis Atwoli. Francis Atwoli, or Brother Francis Atwoli, has been in the Labour politics for decades also. He has been very consistent in pushing for the unity of Luhya community. He is a self-proclaimed Luhya spokesperson, very controversial indeed, because the leaders are divided on his position as a spokesperson for the Luhya community, but he's famously known for the declarations, especially the ones he does in Buhungu, and of course he has been very active and is seen to influence the kind of leaders that come from Western Kenya. Still in Western Kenya, we have Burundi Nabwera, an old name, but a majority of you could still remember this name. He is a member of the Luhya Council of Elders, and he was a one-time ambassador, also seen as someone who influences quite some election outcome from the western part of the country. Remember, we're giving you the names, but it's upon you to decide if they are kingpins or they are kingmakers in their region. And still in the western part of the country, that face might be a little bit, you might be familiar with that face because his son, Musalia Mudavadi, who took over after his death when he was only 29 years old. This is Moses Mudamba Mudavadi. He served as a cabinet minister in the late President Moi's government. Now, he is also seen as someone who influenced a lot of political outcomes in Western Kenya. Perhaps that's the last name from Western Kenya. Let's see if there's one more from that side of the country. And we are still in Western because Philip Masinde Muliro, he actually has a monument. He has something named after him in Western Kenya. It's a very famous name. He's a chairman Luhya. He was the chairman of Luhya Council of Elders, served in the cabinet for about 5 years, and was a member of parliament for 2 terms, that's of 10 years. Philip Masinde Muliro, also a notable name in Western Kenya. And finally, a guy we used to call Askari Kombo Kombo, or Muskari Kombo. He was a former cabinet minister, very active in Western Kenya politics, and also seen to be able to influence the kind of election outcome. However, he was a member of parliament before being a cabinet minister. Now, that's from Western Kenya. Now let's go to Eastern. I thought I still have one more name. Mulu Mutisia. This is from Eastern Kenya now. Kanu Pointman in Ukambani. But how did he get to be Kanu Pointman in Eastern Kenya? Well, he eclipsed Paul Ngei, who was at that time the Kanu spokesperson. 1961, we know he formed the new Akamba Union to bring the Akamba people together. And in 1974, he was nominated to parliament by Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. That is Mulu Mutisia from eastern part of the country. It's upon you to decide if they're kingmakers or kingpin from that region. Eastern Kenya, still Paul Ngei, very notable name. A lot of history regarding Paul Ngei, former freedom fighter, established the African People's Party, fought for the rights of Africans to claim back their lands from the colonial masters, and served in the Kenyatta and Moi cabinets. Now, Paul Ngei is also a notable name and still seen to influence a lot of things that come from the eastern part of the country. All right, now to Central, quite a number of names from Central Kenya. But I'll begin with Kenneth Stanley Njindo Matiba, man I share with the name. Joined Moi's cabinet back in 1993, just as we were being born, played a central role in the struggle for multipartyism. Remember, it went on to repealing of Section 2A. He was a founder member of Fordashili Party, Sabasaba Asili, and of course, we know he fell out with the late President Moi after a disputed 1998 election. And we know him because he was arrested and detained during the struggle for multipartyism in Kenya. That is the first name from Central Kenya. We still have more names from that region. And we have the man who said, if you rattle a snake, be ready to be bitten. John Mishuki, one of the powerful politicians from the central part of the country, served in the Kibaki government, pushed for Uhuru as Mount Kenya Kingpin, and served as cabinet minister. Remember, he's the one who said that if you want to face the mountain or go to the mountain, you have to go to the mountain through President Uhuru. John Michuki, the late, also seen to influence a lot of political outcomes from there. But before him was J.J. Kamotho, John Joseph Kamotho, loyal to President Moi. He was defined by his loyalty. KANU point man in Central and served as KANU Secretary General just before Raila Odinga took it in 1997. But Kamotho, the late, was also seen to influence a lot of election outcome from the Central Kenya. Mwai Kibaki, the third president of Kenya, has a long history being the first vice president and all that, but he became Kenya's third president, was for a long time considered a Nyeri political kingpin, and he was in several parties, among them DP, KANU, NAK, and PNU. He went to power through the NAK coalition, served in the Kenyatta and Moi government, served as the opposition member of parliament from 92 to 2002, 10 years, and he unsuccessfully ran for election in 1992 and 1997. At that time, you lose, but you still become a member of parliament, so you're still active in politics. All right, from there we go to another region of the country that has also huge influence, and a lot of people that you can say are kingpins or they're kingmakers in that region. And you realize in this list we have the Deputy President William Ruto. So several of them: Hosea Kiplagat, Wilson Letich, Ezekiel Bargatunyi. If you go to Eldoret town, you must know the Bargatunyi building along Kitara Street. Francis Lotodo, and of course Deputy President William Ruto, who is also seen as a kingpin because he's made quite some people also occupy positions of leadership. This is from Rift Valley, but let's pick a few now and talk about them from the Rift Valley. And who do we pick? Let's pick William Olentimama from the Ma community. He was a staunch KANU supporter during his heyday, served in Narok County Council for 15 years, served as a member of parliament and minister for 25 years, joined ODM in 2007, and in 2013 he announced that he was retiring from active politics, and of course he died a few years later. That is William Olentimama from the Ma community. And Coast Region also has quite a number. We'll pick just one to talk about him, but the rest of it we'll show you. Ronald Ngala, Karisa Maitha, and Rashid Shajad. We couldn't find a picture of him, but these are names that they said played a huge role in the politics of the Coast Region. So let's pick one and see. Sharif Nasir, who doesn't remember loyal KANU supporter, follower of President Moi. He served as Mvita Member of Parliament. His son is currently the Member of Parliament, was a key KANU figure and became Mombasa KANU chairperson, served as Assistant Minister, and of course he rose to the position of Minister. We pick him from the coast. Is he a kingpin? Is he a kingmaker from that region? Of course, it's arguable because others say that Ali Hassan Joho, the current governor, should be on that list, but we didn't put him on this list for obvious reasons. Now, Nyanza region now. And when you talk about Nyanza region, two names come top of the mind, or one name, the Odingas. So you divide it into Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, the late, died in 1994, and Raila Odinga, who's been running for president 4 times, is doing the 5th term. But under their wings, there are a lot of politicians who have grown their wings and become notable politicians. So are they kingmakers or kingpins of the region? Oginga Odinga is widely described as a doyen of opposition politics. Now, Oginga served as Kenya's first vice president, followed by Mwai Kibaki, and Raila Odinga has remained one of the most influential opposition political leaders in the country today. Right now, he wants to be the 5th president of Kenya, and that's where we are with Kivumbi 2022. Let's see what else we have on the board tonight. And Professor Samongeri from the wider Gusii land. Now, one of the longest-serving politicians from Gusii land, an influential figure in Gusii land politics, and was the face of the Jubilee Alliance in Gusii land, Professor Samongeri. But we'll pick one more, Simeon Nyachae, because we all know him. He founded his own party, Ford People, Kalamu, Moja na watu wengi, and he comes from the Nyanza region. Simeon Nyachae is was a wealthy businessman and very, very influential politician in Gusii land, controlled Gusii politics, and this happened for over 30 years, served in various cabinet positions. In 2002, he was a presidential candidate with the Ford People Party ticket, and in 2007, Simeon Nyechai, Mzee Simeon Nyechai, announced he exits politics, and we know his name has been carried on by his son, Charles Nyechai, who is Member of Parliament for Iela. So this, you decide tonight. Are they kingmakers? Are they kingpins? And how much more have they influenced the elections from different parts of the country? Now, on the other side of the round table is Akisa Wandera, my colleague with Dr. Barak Muluka now, because I understand our other guests are running late, Akisa.
Right, not actually running late. When it rains, it pours, Ken. And tonight, joining me here on the round table is Barak Muluka, political analyst. And it would appear we will have Barak Muluka for the show tonight. As per earlier communication, other panelists that we expected tonight, Dr. James Nyikal, who's a Member of Parliament for Seme, has run into some issues as his flight has delayed, so we apologize for that. And Professor Peter Kagwanja has also run into some personal problems, hence will not make it to the show tonight. But this being Kivumbi 2022, the show has to go on, and we are glad, Barak, that you're here with us today. And you've made it on time. Good to see you, good to have you here on the round table. And of course, Ken, good to have you. Looks like it's just...
It's the first time we're meeting this year on Kivumbi 2022.
Actually, yes. Yeah. So really good to see you.
All right, I guess we begin the show tonight, and very interesting, if you look at the names that we've mentioned on the board tonight. First, the description of Kingpin or Kingmaker, does it fit some of those names, or does it fit all of those names, Barak?
Thank you very much, but first of all, greetings. This is the first time that we are meeting, and my first time on this show in this house this year.
Oh, really?
So I might as well say Happy New Year to your viewers before the month is out. This is the last day of the month. I've worked with keen interest, Ken, as you have run through the gamut, and I have been wondering here a little bit loudly with Akisa Wandera, whether some of the people are kingpins, some of them kingmakers. I've seen the two idioms used. I don't know whether you have used them interchangeably. You are going to educate me a little bit on that. But to be a kingpin in an environment, it means that the civic activities gravitate around you, they orbit around you, that you call the shots. If you say we go this way, everybody goes with you that way. If you say about turn, everybody turns around. They don't ask questions. They just turn around with you.
They just follow you.
They follow you.
Yes.
If you say jump, they don't even ask how high. It is for you to tell them a little higher than that, or to tell them that is too high. Do we have individuals in the country with that kind of capacity? Yes, I think we have. We have seen, for example, the former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, when he says Kibaki Tosha, the community in which he was born and reared does not ask. It will turn with him. If he says Mbaya ni Mbaya, they will say Mbaya ni Mbaya with him. If he says it's time for handshake, they will say it is time for handshake. If he says it's time for BBI, they will say it is time for BBI. Does Dr. William Ruto have the same kind of capacity? Yes, I think he does so. We saw that when he said we are remaining in Kanu in 2002, the people around him, that community, stayed with him. When he said we are going to ODM in 2005, they went to ODM. And when he said we are vacating this space in 2011, they left that space. When he said that their next stop was going to be UDM, I think it was, they sojourned there for a few weeks. It turned out to have been a difficult place. They left that environment. They went to URP. And when they said from URP that we are dissolving this, we are becoming Jubilee, they became Jubilee. Nobody questioned that. And when he said now we are trooping out of Jubilee, we are going to UDA, they went to UD. Of course, there are exceptions. There are those who remained in Kanu, and one would want to acknowledge that there are those exceptions. What is the mood today? I think he has run away with that electorate. You could look at Ukambani and you could see that Kalonzo Musyoka, in spite of challenges here and there from some of the pretenders to the throne, he still exercises that power. We saw, for example, in 2017, that there were people who claimed to have their own parties, but they still found it necessary for purposes of their own self-preservation, perhaps with the exception of Chap Chap, that they got into some kind of arrangement with him. And even now, you have seen that Governor Ngilu is orbiting around Kalonzo Musyoka. But when we move outside those communities, I do not seem to see people you would seriously call kingpins who have the same kind of capacity. Certainly, President Uhuru Kenyatta is facing the acid test. This is the first time for him to show whether he's really the kingpin in the mountain, or whether there is another kingpin, or it's an open environment. Central has had a problem since the days of Jomo Kenyatta. It has been a little difficult to have an individual whom you'd call a kingpin. There was a kingmaker. We could talk of John Michuki as a kingmaker, and among the people in the college that settled for Uhuru Kenyatta in 1992, when the politics of multi-party competition returned, we saw that there was Mwai Kibaki with his Democratic Party, and there was Ken Matiba with Ford Asili, and there was no unanimity. Therefore, difficult to talk about a kingpin in that context. Otherwise, I've seen other people, Ken, whom you have mentioned fairly quickly before I come back to you, particularly in the Kanu years. Were those people kingpins, the likes of William Olentimama? I've seen there, Elijah Mwangale from Western, I've seen there. Even from central Kenya, I've seen some other persons there. Were they even kingmakers? I don't think so. Those were President Moi's vassals. They are people whom he jailed with his fingers and put them there. They served at his will. Whenever he wanted, he shuffled them around, and some would come back saying that we are so happy at home that you have brought me back. Even the cuckoos at home are very happy that you have recalled me, that the party has forgiven me, that even people who are disciplinarians within the Kanu party, they would find themselves on the high road to nowhere in the cold, and they would have to come back as seeking clemency from President Moi. So he was the one making them rather than them
pulling the strings. But the fact that even, be that as it may, even with the kind of support these people received from their regions, doesn't that count for anything?
I think a lot of that was in contestation. There were people whom you would say that this is the person who calls the shots in Region A, but you'd find that the community had not accepted that individual. You could go to Kisii, you could go to Western, you could go to Luo Nyanza. There were very many people who tried to rally around President Moi and Kanu. And yet there was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who was outside the establishment, and all he needed to do was to say, if you are going to Karachonyo, if you see Phoebe Asio, please say hello to her. And that would be enough. It would be a pronouncement maybe made at a funeral, because political gatherings had been banned in that day and age. It was very difficult for you to convene a political rally. These days, of course, politicians materialize at a marketplace and it becomes a rally. suddenly. They do not even observe the most basic of the requirements that you shall inform the police so that they provide necessary protection. And you saw that there was that kind of individual. And therefore, I do think that it has been very difficult to talk about kingpins. In my own backyard in Luya land, the Abaluya are the proverbial Tower of Babel. They don't know what they want, even when they seem to be in their element, expressing what they think that they want. Some behave as if they have administered foreign substances upon themselves, at which point you do not know whether they are the ones who are articulating or whether it is something that they have administered upon themselves that is talking. And even the things that they called unity calls, they are in doubt, they are in question. And in the fullness of time, they are likely to find themselves outside the fence again, peeping in through the windows as the party is going on.
Okay. So would you rather they are called ethnic chiefs?
They're not even ethnic chiefs as such, because to be an ethnic chief, the ethnic community must accept you as that. There are certain institutions and entities that are being superimposed upon communities. They have traditionally never been there. Among the Luo, they have had the Ker, yeah? And that person is recognized as such. They have had the Council of Elders that was called the Ogul Mama among the Luo. And it had its role that it was playing, and a bit of that residually can be seen today. They have had certain traditions that are built around the grand hero, the great hero. If you look at their migrations, they had always these grand heroes, the Joko Molo, Joko Winnie, Joko Kech, the Joka Ojok, and so on. You don't see those kinds of persons among the Luya, for example. If you talk about the Bantu migrations into the East African region, who are the great heroes who led these people? Who would be the equivalent of Omolo? Who would be the equivalent of Ojok? If you talk about the Joka Jok, the Joko Molo, the Joko Winnie, yeah? The Jopadola, who would be the equivalent? That did not exist, but you can go into other entities like the Kalenjin communities, the Ma communities, and you will find the Laibon tradition that was there. And although the function of the Laibon was hugely religious, hugely of a divine nature, there is that entity, there's that institution. Among the Luo, again, Ken Mijungu, there is the whole sophisticated practice of quote-unquote hero worship. There must always be this grand hero, the Luanda Magere Gor Mahia kind of person who is a legend, bigger than life figure. And if there wasn't one, they would create one. Because they must rally around that kind of person. Among the Kikuyu, they had the institution of the Adhamaki, those elders and who played certain key roles. So such things are recognized. Can we say the same about the institution of the Nabongo of Wanga? Even the name itself, when you say the Nabongo of Wanga, it already excludes the rest of the communities. Not to mention the fact that even the Wanga kingdom was a vassal state of the kingdom of Buganda, and that the paramountcy of the Nabongo Mumia was an externally generated happening by the British, who decided that this is going to be the paramount chief of the Abaluya, and his jurisdiction will extend all the way to Naivasha. So what do I call these people, Ken, having gone round and round that way? The people that we see are influence mongers. They're peddlers of influence. Francis Atwoli is basically a peddler of influence, an influence monger, a self-imposed one who comes and says, I'm speaking. And when I speak and I say the Abaluya will go this way, then they go that way. They are sort of, again, quote unquote, warlords, in spite of the fact that the war that we see is a war of words. It may not be a physical war where they are using implements, but I'm seeing that they are essentially warmongers, employing a war of words. You know, war can be waged using many avenues.
Yes, but I wonder though, because from your analysis, the people you seem to think are kingpins worth their salt are Raila Odinga, William Ruto, and you've also mentioned Kalonzo Musyoka, even with a few problems that you seem to think he has in his backyards. But then you also mentioned something around pretenders to the throne, and I imagine there's pockets of those in various parts of the country. Just how much influence will these kingpins, kingmakers, pretenders to the throne, influence mongers have in the upcoming 2020 August 9th polls? Do you think the voter is mature enough to depart from the decisions made by those that would love to call themselves or refer to themselves as kingpins or seem to be kingpins of their regions?
I think a lot of that, Akisa, would seem to depend on how the peddlers of influence are able to mobilize the community at the emotional level, not so much at the intellectual level, but at the emotional level. And if you have listened very carefully to the political top-notch, the cream of the cream, they keep on talking about things or entities they call our community, our interests. I watched not so long ago Professor Kagwanja. I had hoped that he would be on the show tonight, and I watched him with Jeremiah Kioni, and the hub, at the very hub, at the very center, the soft center of what they were speaking about was our community. That ethnic nationalism seems to supersede the Kenyan nationalism. And therefore, the influence of these people depends very much to the extent to which they are able to subordinate the bigger national interests to the interests, the so-called interests of the community, of the tribe, of the ethnic entity. In some parts of the country, I think it's working. I think if you look at the Kalenjin, for example, Ruto has already run away with the vote. I don't know what is left. If you look at the Luo, Raila Odinga has already run away with the vote, and it's going to take quite some effort for anybody to claw into that and take away any chunk. There's this wrestling for the Kikuyu soul. I do not know at this point whether it will go with President Kenyatta, whom some are tempted to see as a lame duck. And the notion of lame duck should be understood. When we talk about lame duck in social science, you are talking about a leader whose influence is diminishing because he or she is getting into injury time, that the tenure is virtually over and they are in waiting space, they're in transitional space. When people look at him or her, they see a lot more of the past, someone who has been, rather than somebody who is carrying them into the future. And Deputy President William Ruto has projected himself as the future, and therefore is appealing to those who want to look into the future. There was the by-election, I think it was in Kiambaa and elsewhere, and the DP said, if you are looking at the future, you look at myself and UDA. If you are looking at the past, you look at President Uhuru Kenyatta and Jubilee. So that lame duck tag is likely to diminish the president's influence, but then he's the sitting head of state. He's from that community. Let's give him the weekend when we hear he's going to meet the people from that community. Even as head of state, once in a while you must recognize that you come from somewhere, and you must go and interact with the members of that community and tell them that this is my wish list. Will they listen to you? In that particular context, we wait and see. Kalonzo Musyoka in Ukambani is having these challenges. I think, however, that the departure of Musalia Mudavadi seems to give him some sympathy votes in Ukambani, and there's been some good kind of marketing of the kind that you would call propaganda. They say, I had offered him the position of deputy president, and even Gideon had already accepted, and Wetangula said he had no problem with that, but he still has got his assignment cut for him. Musalia Mudavadi, finally, for the time being, and I recognize that the other Kenyan communities which we could talk about, Musalia Mudavadi is going to depend very much on whether the massive Luhya population is able to recognize that the politics of this country within the ranks of the big five, of the big six, are like buying and selling dogs at a dog marketplace. When you go there, you don't behave as if you are at a chicken marketplace, that the mobilization is around the community. And therefore, when you have a leader like Musalia Mudavadi, you don't have to like the decision that he has made. It's just that he has taken a decision and you go with him. If you want to upbraid him, you don't call the cameras and start screaming at him. When you do that, you are dividing the community even more. It's very difficult to cohere. The stuff that Francis Atwoli, Marende, Jirongo, and the others are doing, it does not bring coherence within that community. Mudavadi has got his own followers, and they will go with him. So none of these people eventually ends up commanding the entire community.
Which is very interesting, Barack, because you began by describing the kingpins or kingmakers. If they say, let's move right, they move right. Let's go left. You even said if you jump, they'll only ask how high.
No, they don't even ask.
They don't even ask.
They just jump.
Without even asking how high. But my question is, with what you have said last about division and holding parallel spaces where now you tell these people different things, so it takes them away from that community. How does it tie up? Because then you don't have a proper hold on your people. If a separate press conference, for example, would dissuade you from following, and you end up saying no one will eventually hold the whole place. So how does that tie up with your first point, that if you say go this way, they go that way, regardless of whoever comes? It means you don't have a stronghold. So does that make you someone who exerts influence in that particular community to be labeled a kingpin or a kingmaker in that region?
I think, and let's be very specific here. I think here now we are talking about the Luhya.
Yes. Oh, just Luhya only.
The Luhya community.
But Barack, we have parallel. I'll give you from whichever community.
Look at the coast region also.
Yeah, even the coast region is divided. Look at Kingi and Joho. Even go to Nyanza. It's always been attempted before. When Raila was running and James Orengo tried, or when he was running and Peter Nyang' tried. Go to Western. It's the same thing. Kalonzo will say this, then Mamangilo and the rest of the governors will say this. Go to Western. Mudavadi will say this. Then there's this separate team that you mentioned of Francis Atwoli, and they'll say go this direction. Even go to central Kenya. The president will say this, and there are so many Gachagwas and all that who will say a separate thing. So it's the same thing.
No, it is not the same thing, and let me walk right through the same motions that you have taken us through. If you go to the coast, you're not talking about a homogeneous community. At the coast, and the two examples that you have given, Kingi. Kingi is, strictly speaking, an indigene of the coast. Joho, with the most preponderant respect and humility, is not an indigene of the coast. That is the migrant or the residue of the migrant Arab population, which has gone through many permutations and which has got its own distinct identity at that coast. And there are others who are from the Kenyan mainland, so it becomes a very tricky state of affairs. If you look at Kalonzo Musyoka, in 2013, for example, Charity Ngilu did not gravitate along with him, and she paid the price. When she wanted to become the governor of Kitui, she had to come back home into the fold before she could then succeed. The Kiama Kilonzos of this world fell by the wayside. If we go to Luo Nyanza,
But
yes.
Barack, that's not correct, because Charity Ngilu, 2013, was a member of the cabinet. Then she ran in 2017 and won the election.
Yeah, but
she didn't run for governor.
She became a member of the cabinet in 2013
yes.
after she had attempted to...
She attempted to run in 2013?
To run for office and lost, and president
office of the governor?
President, not office of the governor. She tried to run
for president. 97.
No, not for president. In a parliamentary outfit, because she was there. She was in fact in the morning with Raila Odinga, in the afternoon with Musalia Mudavadi, in the evening.
I remember that KICC happening.
Yes, in the
evening. She actually walked to the KICC.
With William Ruto, and it became very difficult for her.
I just got lost when you said that she had to come back to the fold.
Yes,
that is why I got lost, because...
So in 2017,
she had to come back.
She had to come back to the fold.
2017, yes.
And if you go to Luoland, it is true that when Raila Odinga was fighting for that space, because as the grand hero, he had to fight for it, and for a long time in the mid 90s, 1995, 96, there were those unending street skirmishes every Friday between the militias. Yes, there were militias, Raila Odinga's militias, and the militias of Mayor Lawrence Akinyi Oile. He had to grab that space. He did not take it on a silver platter. And after he had taken it, there were those who still thought that they would resist. James Orengo, Professor Peter Anyang', they tried to prop up Charity Ngilu. They gave her a political party. They said they were the party that stood for certain values. They made her run for president in 1997, and it cost them their seats, one in Ugenya, the other one in Kisumu Rural. Fortunately for Professor Anyang', the Charity Ngilu party, I think it was the Kenya Social Congress, it had a nomination slot, so they nominated Professor Anyang' to Parliament. Orengo stayed in the cold, eating the bread of sorrow and drinking of the cup of affliction for 5 years. Then in 2013, after he had taken his lesson, he came back to
2007
to Raila in 2007,
Yeah.
and he told him, like the children of Muntu in Joe de Graaf's play titled Muntu, that I submit, Father, I come back before you. I have sinned before the world, before God, and before you. Forgive
And that is
me.
politically correct.
Forgive me and take me.
Okay, so the scenarios, as you say, Baraka, are different. But let me take the conversation away from the Kingpins and talk to us now about Kingmakers. The ability, for example, of Raila Odinga, who has never run anywhere in Nyanza, to get only the members of parliament that he wants, only perhaps majority of the governors that he wants in that region, only the majority of senators that he wants in that region. That is something that is a preserve of a few. So at the top of your mind, perhaps, William Ruto in 2013 and 2017, he brought in a lot of young members of parliament. You can see them all over. Governors, look at the governors of Nandi, for example. Then the senators also very young, Aaron Cheriot and the likes. So William Ruto was able to bring in very, very few people. So if at the top of your mind, who else in the country is able to fit that tag of a kingmaker, that we can say this is specifically a kingmaker, not a kingpin? He will stand in Nairobi and say, I only want this and this and this to happen in Rift Valley, and it will happen.
It happens.
Yes, as William Ruto will say, he's running for president. But believe me, anyone he wants to win the other side, whether you call it democracy or whatever, those are the people who will support him when he becomes president. So who else at the top of your mind do you think fits that profile in the country?
Off the top of my mind, it's very difficult for me to see anybody else. First, because these people have earned those positions. They did not just happen. When William Ruto was running around in 2007, positioning and posturing for someone who wanted to be president. Remember, he participated in the ODM primaries in 2007. And people were looking at him, including myself, and we were wondering, this young man, he actually thinks he can be the president, and he's in this star-studded environment. It was a galaxy of stars. There was Raila Odinga, there was Joe Nyaga, there was Musalia Mudavadi, there was Kalonzo Musyoka. You remember the Pentagon at that time, and Charity Ngilu also chimed in from somewhere in the wings in her usual very discerning manner. And there was William Ruto, but he was seeing very far. He was seeing that in the future he would be ahead of his age mates. However, there were people who were older than himself, and he made sure that what you do is to edge out these older people, make them irrelevant, so that when the boys look around and they want to look up to an elder,
they'll only
you
find
are
him on the
the only one that they are finding on the scene, and therefore you occupy that particular space. In the case of Raila Odinga, he was concurrently making an impact at the national level and making an impact at the grassroots. The decision that Raila Odinga took in 1996 to resign from Ford Kenya to go to NDP was a very bold step. It was a first. It had not been done. It has not been done again. That people will be posturing. They will be saying that we have left this party. We are now in this party.
Was that Ford Kenya? Ford Kenya, they separated with the late Wamalwa before.
No,
that was LDP. The
No. That was the time, Ken. You know, I'm now not just a student of history.
You're teaching me history here.
But I've been there observing, observing these things because Jaramogi died in 1994.
Yes.
And the contestation within Ford Kenya went on for quite some time until when they
ended up in Thika
with the Most Reverend Manasseh Kuria,
Okay.
trying to preside over the Ford Kenya
So
National.
96, he was still in
Yes.
Ford Kenya. Okay,
Yes.
because they fought for that. Yeah.
And he
With Wamalo.
he resigned
Yeah.
from the party,
Ford Kenya, okay.
from Parliament, and went to Langata. We were closing in to the elections,
We captured this.
and people were watching him. They were wondering whether he would make it. It was a very bold, very daring move. He won, and after he won, those who cannot lead, who just wait in the wings, they trooped in. With the exception of Ramogi Achengoneko, an elder who remained out, and when he went to Rarieda to defend his seat, he was a lonely man who had elected to remain in Ford Kenya, the party they founded with Jaramogi, Masinde Muriro, and other people. He understood real politics, but there was an emotional part of him that could not break away from that party. And he lost the 1997 election.
Well educated now.
and therefore that became the point at which he exited. Okay? So it is difficult to look at the national landscape and see those individuals, because it is a labor of love. You have got to go out and fight for it. You can't just take it. It's not given, as we said earlier.
You have to fight for your position.
And traditionally, that was how kingdoms were formed.
Not even Uhuru Kenyatta Barack has that ability?
And I don't think so. Uhuru Kenyatta was gelded. He was gelded by people, first of all. I recall in 1997, Hilary Ngweno publishing the lead story in the Weekly Review, and on the cover was a photograph of Uhuru Kenyatta, and the title read "The Reluctant Politician," because he was being drawn from his comfort zones. He came in, he lost to a certain Muya, then Gatundu. It wasn't yet subdivided. The Gatundu seat. He felt humiliated. He wanted out. He didn't want these things.
But he was nominated subsequently.
He went back. He was nominated in the dying hours of that regime for a very short period, because the professor of politics had other ideas of what he wanted to do with him, and even when he positioned him there and said, "This is the one I want," the country doubted. But before that, he had transited through being made the KANU chairman of the Kiambu branch, and the tourism promotion board, before being nominated into parliament upon the exit of Makto. So he was gelded, but even that gelding was not enough. It had to take this sparring with Mwai Kibaki, and he's also succumbing to a greater authority within the community. And the elders, led by John Michuki,
Limuru Declaration,
telling us, if you want to do political business with us, you will go through Uhuru wa Kenyatta. And then there was the Limuru thing, where he was told, form a party. He did not have a party.
So he was told, form a party. In other words, there were the kingmakers behind President Uhuru Kenyatta. It wasn't him. And even right now, he doesn't have that ability, according to you, to stand and say, this is what I want in this region, and it happens.
As I said earlier on, the taste of that pudding is going to be eaten this weekend. But I think there's something very important which we must attempt to understand. It's a rather complex construct, but the architecture and design of the Kenyan state is essentially the type of state that Max Weber, the historian, lawyer, sociologist, has called a new patrimonial state, where the state exists to serve itself, not to serve the people. And all these people that we are seeing around the center of the state are the clients of the state, and they are being paid by the patron. The patron is procuring their support, and quite often through using state and public resources. And that state has survived rather well up to where we are. The first 15 years, there was no need for succession. The next 24 years, the first 14 of them, there was no need for succession. Then the next 10 years, that state managed to succeed itself. When President Mwai Kibaki arrived on the scene, he was a member of that new patrimonial state. There was no crisis. Uhuru Kenyatta has been a member of that state. There has been no crisis. Now that state is in the danger of being disrupted. And the state is attempting to manage its own disruption by saying that the right person to disrupt us, because that disruption
natural forces
seems to be inevitable.
Natural.
And yes, if it's disrupted with by natural forces in the political environment, then it will get destroyed. It will collapse.
And like when personalities are behind it. I know, and I know she wants to ask a question, but I'm also interested in the fact that we have organizations such as the Mount Kenya Foundation. I really want to know, before she asks the question, where would you put it? Are they the Kingmakers? But I got a quick reaction here from Honorable Engineer Gumbo.
Yes.
Who's attempting to explain something that probably earlier we didn't get really well. In 2013, actually, he says Charity Ngilu ran for Senate, and David Musila beat her to it. So that's when she moved ahead. So that's a correction that is necessary. Then he also mentioned the 97 that we mentioned. It's not 97. He says 97, James Orengo ran on a Ford Kenya ticket and won the Ugenya seat. The same year, Anyang' Nyong'o ran on SDP under Charity Ngilu and lost.
Yes.
Then he was later nominated to Parliament. You are correct.
Then that was 2002.
When he lost to Ugenya to Ondiek and the presidency to Kibaki. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So talk to me about these groups like Mount Kenya Foundation. Would you categorize them as the Kingmakers? And such organizations, for example, the Buhungu Declaration, the people behind it, would you declare them, categorize them as Kingmakers? Because Francis Atwoli said, we will tell you who and who and who are supposed to run and win these seats. Where would you categorize them? Or they are non-existent at all?
They are there. The Mount Kenya Foundation is part of the state behind the state. That there is the state that the people know. There's the state, the government that they have elected, but there are those powerful forces, the influence mongers behind the state, the people whom there was a TV show after the news in one of the media houses which used to say who owns Kenya, because the country rides on the backs of these people. They own the country where it matters, and they have an interest in determining who gets to power. And sometimes when they don't want you, what the electors have said stays quiet in the ballot box, and what they want is proclaimed. Kivuitu will be told, announce. Announce. You must announce. So the Atwolis are a ragtag version of what these fellows are, because they do not have the wherewithal. In Luhya land, they have raw numbers, but they do not have the rest of the instruments and the implements that it takes to mobilize or even to shortchange the
state behind the state
system. So they are trying to be the state behind the state, but they are essentially like the wildebeest. I wrote that in the newspaper recently, and some got very annoyed with me, and I'd like to say again that they are like the wildebeest. They have got very many numbers, but those numbers are useful only to outsiders. The numbers of the wildebeest are useful to the rest of the wildlife, because the wildebeest, in spite of its numerical superiority, sits very low on the food chain.
Okay. We don't have too much time, and now that you bring in the issue of numerical strength, where we are right now, the conversation is around coalition making, and really each side is trying to put together a formidable team to get into the election with. So then, looking at communities that are fragmented with very small gods, quote unquote, case in point, Western region, when it comes to the formation of coalitions or making of coalitions, how then do you marshal numbers from communities that are fragmented the way they are with kingpins or various tribes or various facets of it? How easy or how hard is it going to be to form coalitions in a situation like this?
I think they must be scattered. Davadi was talking about scattering them
Then
gathering them. And they're going to be scattered. And I'm afraid, I come from the Luhya community. I challenge any person who thinks that he or she is more Luhya than I am, or who imagines they are more eloquent in the Luhya dialects. I speak all of them, yeah, with massive eloquence. And I understand the tradition and the culture very well. But I can tell you that they are going to be eaten, whether they like it or not, because they are scattered. Neither UDA nor Azimio is good for them when they are not united.
Yeah.
What is happening here is, if you look at the formation within ODM, the Oparanya wing, these are visitors in ODM. When they get into the high seas and they offend the owners of ODM and they tell them, get out, ship out, they can't ship out. They don't have even a raft of their own that would help them to ship out. Those like Dr. Bona Khalware, who are in UDA, they cannot ship out. They don't have anything that they could stand on.
Their own.
Those of their own.
Yes.
So they are visitors. Those like Seli Sumiu and Wafula Wamnyinyi, who are in DAP, they are using a hired vehicle whose owners can tell them that return that vehicle DAP here anytime now, and they will be left high and dry. The possibility that Mudavadi and Wetangula, who have got the closest thing to homegrown vessels, the possibility that they could bring them together is also facing the test of time. We have to wait and see. But this looks like one community that is going to be left in disarray once again.
Would you say the same for the Mount Kenya region, seeing how fragmented it is?
If they behave like they are Luhya brothers, and we recognize that both are Bantoid, they're going to end up the same way. But when you look at the Mount Kenya community, they are slightly ahead of the Luhya, because they have these little vessels that you say their very own, yeah, that they can say we are coming on this vessel and we are negotiating. Unfortunately, that is how politics is transacted in this country. People are mobilizing along ethnic lines. The people from the coast had better fashion their own thing that they used to get in here, from Kisii, from Maasai land. That, unfortunately, is the reality about the country we live in.
Okay, we've run out of time. I just want to give you to give us an analogy here, perhaps, of how to win election in Kenya with Kingpins and Kingmakers in just a minute. And I know you've read the book named Renegade, the Barack Obama book, and it states very well the part that David Plouffe and Rahm Emanuel played in his ascension to power. It was a strategy that was built. Would you call such people who are behind political campaigns as kingmakers? Would you name them as such?
Yes, certainly. People like David Axelrod, Rahm Emanuel, among others, that they are invisible. They are in the back room. And when you look at military stratagem, you'll find that there are people, operatives, who sit in the back rooms, in the command rooms, and they're watching the whole arena. They're almost like chessboard masters. They see 6 pieces, 6 moves ahead, and they're planning and moving this piece and moving the other piece. Unfortunately, our context lacks that kind of maturity. When you look at Barack Obama, he allows himself to become the project, so to speak, of these kingmakers. Once he has that team and he's there willing to listen to them, to follow their guidance, he may not quite agree, but then this is the position that has been taken, and he has got sufficient confidence in that team.
Yeah.
Here we don't do that. When you are the candidate, you are also your own chief campaign manager.
You micromanage everything.
The one who
security chief
is the security chief. You are the financier. You are also the programmer, and you decide everything. When you get people around you, they are like trophies. You want to put them on display and say, I've got so-and-so.
You don't even trust them.
So-and-so, and you don't even trust them. They're basically for purposes of show, to display them. And in the long run, when you lose, people wonder that with all these people,
how did you lose?
How did you lose?
A good place to end the show tonight, Barack. Very entertaining and educative indeed tonight.
History lesson we are in for today.
Yeah, I've always trusted him to teach us 1 or 2 things that we didn't know. That's why you are an elder. Thank you so much, Barack Muluka Daktari, for coming tonight and sharing this with us. I wish we had a larger table with the other gentlemen, but we'll do this again. The year is still a girl. In my, they said the year is still a girl.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
Just to mention for our audience, we were meant to have Professor Peter Kagwanja and Dr. James Nyikal. Dr. James Nyikal experienced a bit of trouble with his flight back to Nairobi, and Professor Peter Kagwanja encountered some personal problems, hence why they're not on the round table tonight, just because we mentioned that they will be on the show tonight. But nevertheless, Barack Muluka, thank you for holding the fort. Asante for coming to the show. Hopefully we can have you again on the round table here in Kivumbi 2022. I am Akisa Wandera. Have a good night.
And I'm Ken Mijungu. Have a good night. Let's do this again next week, same place, same time. Have a good topic, but we're still on air beginning tomorrow, 6 a.m. See you then.